Well, welcome and good evening. What we're doing here is basically trying to give people an opportunity to have more than a 30-second minute soundbite answer. And when you have so many people running for office, there's these time constraints. And this is an opportunity where we ask you broad-based philosophical questions.
Okay.
And then you answer them and take as much time as you want. If we take the entire time on one question, that's okay.
Okay.
And if there's a qualifying or some sort of follow-up question, then I might ask that. And so it's going to be more of a conversation. So,
Okay.
And this is Ashley Nicole McCray, and you are running for Ward 6.
Yes.
And I appreciate you coming out today.
Thank you.
And the first question is about how you see your style of leadership. And so there are different styles. There are various approaches to the job of representation. Some elected officials view themselves as a part of the team once elected and consider their constituents to be represented simply by that official's participation in the governmental process. Others' approach to representation is to see themselves not as a part of the government team, but instead as a member of a citizenry that represents the wishes of the citizens to the permanent staff. Others still view their role as an elevated member of staff and a conduit by which the city communicates with the public. So of those three, or maybe a fourth one that you're going to come up with, how do you see yourself as a representative of the people?
Thank you for that question, Tom. I definitely see myself first and foremost as an activist and community organizer. So I definitely see myself, if I am to be elected in this position, as part of the citizenry. That's as far as my understanding goes, that's the whole purpose of a city council, to serve as a representative of the communities that they are elected to represent. So I definitely feel like if I am elected, that my style of leadership, which as it has always been, is to definitely listen to my community, and if they have issues that they want brought forward or they disagree with something that the rest of the city council is trying to enforce, I think it's my role to serve as a facilitator and to stand up as a voice for my community. So I definitely feel like I'm a part of my people, because the policies that our government enacts very much affect my very everyday lived experience, just like the other normal citizens of my ward. So I definitely see myself as one of the people, and I think as an activist and community organizer, I've shown that it's really important to listen to my community, and I'm not always right. To understand that I do make mistakes, but it's important first and foremost to listen to the people that chose me to represent them. So.
Well, and there are different styles of listening.
Yes.
And there are different styles of organizing. So can you kind of elaborate on that piece of it? Is what do you see, or how do you listen to your constituency? How do you get a feel for what you think that they want and need?
So I agree that there are definitely many different styles, and I think that it's also important to recognize that even within one ward, there are many different communities, and each community may have different needs, different experiences, and even within those communities, individuals have very different lived experiences. So it's important to recognize that there are a variety of experiences, that there is not one monolithic experience that can actually characterize one community or one district or ward. So it's really important to recognize that you do have to be flexible, and that whenever you are going into a different community, even within your own communities, that there are going to be people who have different experiences that you do need to incorporate into your worldview. So it's important for me, as someone who does consider myself a minority. I'm a Native woman, and I come from a poor socioeconomic status. I think that it's really important to recognize that I don't know everything. So if I do go into a community, and through my collaboration with different coalitions, like at OU, for instance, I'm part of a coalition of different communities, and we all have very different lived experiences tied to oppression and marginalization. It's important for me to recognize that I don't know their experience. So for me, it's important to go in and just listen. So if I I'm representing my ward, I'll go to the very different communities, because there are several within my ward, and just listen, ask them what the issues are that they're experiencing, what is their lived experience in this space. It's important to recognize that we all navigate this space differently, and if we're talking about inclusivity, then that means truly gauging the different communities that make up our ward. So I think that would be my style of facilitation and listening and organizing, is just to let it be very organic and let the community speak for itself, because they know what issues affect them.
Very good. I think that people tend to think that whatever community you talk about, whatever group or however you come together, that, okay, it's a monolith. And it never is, because we're all individuals. And that individuality that we have comes forward in our everyday life. And how do you feel your individuality is going to come forward in your representation?
So I think that my identity and my experience living and navigating through Norman is really unique to the rest of the candidates, because I am at the intersection of a lot of different identities. So although I am from, I would say, a marginalized community, I am Native American, and I am a woman, and I'm a mother, I'm also a PhD student. So I do intersect with a lot of different communities with varying degrees of privilege. So it's really important when we talk about privilege and identity and experience that we realize that it's not static, that it does change in different places. So although I may not have privilege in one setting, I know that I carry a lot of privilege and power in another. And I think a really strong leader recognizes the strength of their power and recognizes the way that their power unfolds in different settings, and not to abuse that power. I think that is what makes a really good leader. And I think that I definitely have shown that I can do that through my organizing and different facilitation. I think that I definitely bring that to the table.
Well, great. I'm going to move on to the next question. And this goes to the relationship that you will have with staff. The city charter explicitly denotes roles for all council members. How do you view your role as a council member with regards to the city manager's staff?
So I definitely think that collaboration and cooperation are really important, and it's also important to recognize that we do represent different sectors of the city of Norman, and it is important that we do come together, understanding that we are trying to speak for the people that we're representing. So I feel like I've definitely shown that I can work with people who have very different viewpoints. I've definitely had a lot of experience working with President Boren at the University of Oklahoma, and other different groups in administration, just trying to come together to a consensus so that we can move forward on an issue. I think it's important to recognize that you can't always get everything that you want. Move forward, that sometimes you do have to make concessions, and that you do have to understand what's most pragmatic at that time. So I think that I have that understanding and I have that experience, and I think that I would bring that to the city council if I am elected. I think that I would be able to work very well with the different people, and as well as representing my community.
Now with the staff specifically, you have a situation where you have one staff member that the council as a whole controls, and that's the city manager. And all the other staff members are his staff. And we're all human beings. And so sometimes you'll see, although we have a great professional staff here, sometimes somebody's personal bias from staff will creep into a conversation or into the presentation that they give council when the council is trying to get that information to make their decisions. So when you see something like that happening, knowing that that's not your employee that you can directly order to do something or whatever, or discipline, or however a person might choose to handle that, how do you see yourself addressing that situation?
So I think that I think that's kind of a tricky question for me personally, because my approach to personal biases and personal emotional experiences is kind of different. I'm not just a cognitive type person. I'm not just, I think that it's important to bring in emotion and to recognize emotion. So I don't think that I would really minimize the value of someone's personal bias. Whether or not I agreed with it is a different question, but I still think that that personal bias or that emotion that is brought forward in that presentation or in that facilitation is representative of our society, of the social fabric of the city of Norman. So I think that it is valuable to consider. I don't see that it would be something that I would discredit or see as a problem. So I think that that's kind of a tricky question for me to answer, because I see a lot of great value in people acknowledging their personal biases, bringing them forward, because it brings forward a more honest and truthful conversation. And I think that you can get a lot more accomplished that way. So.
Very good, very good. And the council has a different relationship with the mayor. In the city of Norman, it's a manager-council form of government, so we do not have a strong mayor. So how do you, knowing that, how do you view council members, your relationship with the mayor when you're working together on trying to bring things forward?
Well, I definitely think that as an Indigenous person, I bring a perspective of decision-making and council-making that is markedly different from normal city governments. I definitely think that, for instance, in an Indigenous community, although there is a chief who is ultimately responsible, and I kind of see the mayor in that role, even though there is a chief that's ultimately oversees and responsible for the decision-making, their job is more to listen and to incorporate the different ideas from their council members. So they have, that's the whole purpose of a council, is to inform the decision making. So I think that bringing forward that sort of perspective and framing our decision making policies into that framework, I think that I could see a lot more collaboration and moving forward instead of power dynamics that really get in the way of actually making inclusive policies that make the city of Norman more representative of its people.
If you're elected to be the voice of your constituents in Norman's inclusive community, how would you approach a controversial issue? Would you vote with your personal beliefs or your constituents' preferences?
Well, I think that definitely is something that I'm very, very experienced in working through, is coming to decision making through coalition building, because for instance, if you're working with an Indigenous community, the Black community, the queer community, and Latina community, and disability awareness community like I am, we have very different experiences, very different perceptions, and very different perspectives on very minor things, and we have to work through and talk those decisions out. So I think that something that I am really dedicated and really committed to wanting to establish would be some sort of community conversation on in my ward where we can talk about these issues, and it would be some sort of a town hall forum sort of situation where we can talk about these things. So I think that it wouldn't be me just talking about my emotions and my reaction to whatever the issue is, but it would be more of a consensus and more of a synthesis of my perspectives, as well as the citizens who make up my ward's perspectives, because I'm not a leader who is overseeing them and making decisions and imposing it upon them, but I am part of the people who I'm representing. So I think that it's really important for me, and really, if I was on the other side, it's really important that my voice is included if I want it included. So I would go to great lengths to make sure that happened.
Okay. Trust is an essential part of governing. Without trust, it's hard to get anything done. We need trust to get the people to vote for things that fund different parts of government. So how will you build trust in the community?
So I definitely think that just beginning with my campaign on my filing day, I've definitely seen how I'm able to build trust and relationships, especially with people who don't typically participate in government. I've already had a lot of people come forward who are like, I've never considered helping a campaign, but I really want to help you. I feel like it's really important that your voice is there, because my community knows who I am. They've seen me fight for the issues that I care about. They've seen me stand up against really powerful people at the expense of my position. I'm just a lowly graduate student in a PhD program, so I'm very low on the totem pole, but I've stood up for my community, on behalf of my community, on behalf of other people's communities. I am an ally to other communities, and they know that, and they've seen that, so they do trust me. They can look at my record, and they can Google my name, and they can see all the times that I've stood up and held people in positions of power accountable. And I think that just through actions more than just words, that's how you build trusting relationships, and by showing up. So showing up to the different communities, the people who are fighting for water rights, like Stephen Warner and Casey Holcomb, showing up, and then they show up for you, and that's how you build relationships and bridges and trust.
You mentioned the people in power and holding them accountable. One of the ways that we have that are the Sunshine Laws, the Open Meeting Act, the Open Records Act. There's been some controversy on and off in Norman about that. What are your thoughts on the importance of transparency, not just the word, but actually, following through on interpreting and enforcing open meeting and open records?
Yeah, I absolutely, as an activist and organizer, I absolutely think that it's extremely critical that all governments are transparent. And I think that although we do have open meetings and open records, that we could definitely go a step further by making sure that we are more representative of the people who live in our city limits. And I feel like my position, living on the East Side, living and navigating through different communities of color and different socioeconomic statuses, that although it can be transparent or that it appears transparent, I think that we can definitely go the extra step by informing the people who live in our districts and our wards. I think that's a responsibility that I think is inherent in the city council person, not just to serve as a voice of their people, but also to serve as someone who can translate what's going on in the city council. As someone who is in a PhD program but has come from a very hard road, I understand how difficult it is to interpret these different conversations that are going on. They're held at a very high level that isn't accessible to a lot of people in our communities, and I think that it should be our role to make sure that we are informing our citizenry. So that's why I would want to have community conversations to help interpret and translate these conversations that are held at a very inaccessible level. And I think that would be another way of moving forward towards transparency. So.
Well, very good. I think we're at the end of our time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.